Well, hey, everybody, welcome to the Seeing Ability podcast, where we're having a conversation about the world of families who are raising kids with some type of difference. And that means we're going to be talking to a lot of interesting people. Sometimes it is that kid who grew up to be an adult traveling a different path, and they're going to talk about the influence their parents had on them. Sometimes it's going to be parents who are or have raised a kid with some type of difference. And sometimes it's going to be a lot of people that support that community. That could be people in education, people in nonprofits, people in the healthcare community. First of all, I know you're busy and I know you have a lot of choices when it comes to your free time. So thanks for tuning in. I really think you're going to enjoy my guest today. He's a lot of fun. Dr. Mike Norman, who we met through our business world and found out he was a parent who also had a membership in this club. So Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Jim. I am excited to be here. I'm glad it finally worked out. We've been talking about doing this for a little while now. And if I can help with the experience with the Down syndrome, I'm glad to do so.
That's fantastic. For me, this podcast is designed, number one, for education. So I think you guys are going to learn something today. Number two, I think we all need a little burst of motivation. So I think hearing from Mike, that's going to get you pumped up on your journey. And then I also want this podcast to just be another layer of your village, another layer of your community. You listen to this show because the people here understand you. We might have to get something going. Mike, you might be able to help us out with neck pain if we're nodding too much, right, on the show, because we're relating to the guests. Before we get into this journey, we always like to meet our guests, just hear a little bit about them personally. So we're going to do our Fast Four, and that's brought to us by our mutual friend at Reliable Tech Help. If you need their resources, call them at 502-797-7399. The Fast Four, number one. Mike, what's your favorite food?
My favorite food is chocolate ice cream, but probably some sushi would be the one that I enjoy the most.
Okay, very good. If we were to break into one of your listening devices and saw your playlist, what would we find on there?
You're going to find songs that tend to be like 15, 20 minutes long, Grateful Dead style stuff. I like jam bands that like to take me on a little journey before bringing me back and kind of let me zone out a little bit.
Okay, I like that. So you go for the deep ride. I love
Yeah.
it. What are you enjoying these days in the area? It could be a great book you're reading, it could be a show or a documentary or a guilty pleasure streaming you're watching or a movie you've seen.
Yeah. I really do like to stimulate my brain. And so I tend to watch and read stuff that helps me learn stuff. And the most recent book that I was sad when it was over was actually written about glyphosate, which is Roundup, and it's written by a researcher named Stephanie Seneff. And Robert Kennedy Jr. in Congress used her research when he sued Monsanto because Roundup causes cancer, and they spray it all over our foods. And so I need to know this information. She was the researcher, and actually I've reached out to her numerous times after reading the book, and now she's a friend, and I can go to her for high-class MIT research type stuff. That book was so eye-opening to me, and it reinforces the stuff we don't want to eat and put in our bodies. I was really sad when it was over.
Well, that is not the typical answer I get for a good book you're reading, but I mean, I think our guests will know you wouldn't call yourself a typical dude. So that's pretty cool. I like that mind stimulation thing that goes right on brand with you, Mike. Love that. Let me ask you this. For folks who have never met you, you mentioned the Down syndrome connection. So maybe just give us your backstory about your family and what kind of put you into this world of kids who show up differently.
We were at the doctors and they said they were talking about, web hands and feet and stuff. And then they wanted to get a book about Down syndrome. And we just really weren't having it at the time. My wife especially didn't want nothing to do with that Down syndrome book. But I knew if I got a Down syndrome kid, it's because I obviously needed a Down syndrome kid. So for me, I accepted it from the beginning. And she hated that book. But, she said, when I saw you say, we got a Down syndrome kid, it took all the stress off of her because of just being calm about it all and accepting the fact I didn't know what I was getting myself into, but this is an experience that I was going to have, whether I wanted it or not.
Yeah, I love that perspective, and that is really refreshing to hear because I think for a lot of parents, getting over that initial whatever you want to call it, right left turn, curveball that life has thrown you, that you've got a, I don't know, any of us ourselves included know what a typical kid is. I don't know if either one of us were, but when you're going to have the kid that's going to have extra challenges, that can really and have them a little bit. It sounds like it's refreshing that you were pretty quick to adapt to be like, this is what we've got. What's next?
Yeah, I don't always know what's best for me, Jim, and I know it. And so I feel like I was blessed with a child that I wasn't expecting, and it's been great.
I love that. So you probably being in the around the community and running into other folks, you've had a few years under your belt now as a dad. So looking back, what advice would you give to other parents who are newer to this, we'll call it this difference world, especially Down syndrome or even other diagnoses, like from the
Mhm.
dad perspective? What advice would you give?
My emotions like to get involved with things real quick. And when my emotions get involved, my logic goes right out the door. And so when I'm faced with an emotional time like that, I had to just sit quietly and wait on that to pass before I can logically process it all. And what
Mm,
I realized was I was going to have to step my game up a little bit, and I had it in me to do that, and it meant changing the path that I was on and the thought in my mind of how my life was supposed to be was altered. But that's just the way it is. Somebody's got to have a Down syndrome kid, might as well be me. And it turned out to be great because that child brings out the best in me and my family and the people around them. And so just go with it. And it might take some patience, but I don't always know how it's going to turn out either. And so it's almost like a flower waiting to bloom or a gift that you get to open. You think you know how it's going to go, but maybe it's different. And maybe it's even better than you thought it might have been. And that's been the case. That's my outlook. And with that outlook, that has been the case for me. I had to practice patience, but maybe I need to practice patience.
yeah,
So
I
the
love that.
child
Maybe.
teaches me things that I wasn't expecting, but I had to be open-minded to receive it.
And I love that. Maybe it's going to turn out better than I thought it was going to be. I love that. I think that's a really good mantra. And I think sometimes we fall into this pitfall of being like, oh, this is going to be a different path, as if a regular path of raising any kid is predetermined, right? That's anybody who's been a parent knows, well, that's a fallacy. And life never turns out, there's nothing more humbling than being a parent, right? So that's
Mhm.
really good advice, though, is it might turn out to be way better than you thought it was going to be. Let me ask you this question. I think for all parents, sometimes they struggle with expectations and where to set the bar for their kids and how to nurture their kid to obviously you want all kids to do the best they can. What has this journey taught you and where have you had learnings? Where have you even made mistakes as far as what you thought was possible for your child along this way?
From the beginning, let me back up. I know that kids are tough because I was tough growing up. And I know all the stuff I went through. And just because somebody might have a mental handicap or even some physical handicaps does not mean that they're weak. And with Willow, my daughter, one lesson that really taught me a lot was I didn't want her in leg crutches. So that means I got to make their ankles and stuff strong. And so what I did intentionally for the first, as long as I could hold her up, really, I would grab her by her legs and tilt her one way and make her have to right herself. Or I would be on the couch and I would have my knees bent and I would stand her on my knees. So she's like 3 feet off the couch, kind of, and kind of move around a little bit. And I kept her off balance. I would take her in the garden with hills and furrows in the garden and make her off balance and pull her. And the point of it was I'm constantly pushing her physically and even mentally to challenge herself. And I'm making it fun, but I'm not making it easy on them. I am pushing them harder than I would have pushed a regular child. And they're so their brains are able to learn and incorporate that stuff. And she's off crutches, she doesn't have the leg braces and stuff. But people are afraid to push a child because of a perceived disability that they have. But I think that the parents put limitations on that child that the child didn't put on themselves. And
Mm.
so I never found the line that I pushed her and pushed her and pushed her. And sometimes you don't know where the line's at till you cross it. I never found that line. The more I push her, the more she thrives. And even schoolwork and stuff like that, make it fun to them to do. The answers don't have to be correct. But the joy of doing it is the thing. And so it's gotten to where she even likes doing schoolwork even outside of school because it's fun to learn, and telling them that they're smart and that they're strong. You're so strong, look at you. They feed off that stuff. But, oh baby, are you okay? They'll feed off of that too. And so
Mm.
that feeling sorry for your stuff out the window. And I still push her, but she's 8 years old now, and I get to enjoy what I've done for the past 8 years. Now I get to see how it turns out, and push them kids, because a muscle doesn't get strong unless you flex it. And the same is true about their physical and mental abilities too. Push them. It ain't got to be the correct answer. It's the process that you enjoy.
That's a powerful response. That idea that we put limits on them that they never put on themselves. I kind of wrote
Yeah.
that down. That's powerful. Did she along this path, did Willow even have times where you're pretty open and you weren't putting that limit on her, but did she surprise you? Did she do stuff that even you were like, I probably had a limit in my head that I didn't realize, she just passed it?
hmm One thing that we've done with her is we've really watched her diet. And them Down syndrome kids never feel full. So they're hungry all the time because of a problem with the feeling of fullness and these hormones, leptin and ghrelin. And so I've had to keep her off a lot of foods like gluten and breads and grains and sugars and even dairy and stuff like that. I've had to keep her off of that. Um, some people think that they like to eat that, so they want their kid to eat that so they don't miss out. However, because I don't give her that, her attention span is awesome. And she was
Mm.
at a play, with her school, and all the rest of the kids were walking, looking around up at the ceiling and pointing over here this way. And my daughter was sitting there the whole time, locked in with that teacher. Her attention span is much greater because she's had that restricted diet. And so it's been a lot of different angles that we've had to go at. And I'm glad that she can't have gluten or her face will break out because she's healthier because of it. We've had to restrict it, but because we restricted it, I can see the difference between the kids who don't get that work done. And so the more work we put into them, and you'll get to see the results of it. But her health care is kind of high maintenance. But I've kept her
Mhm.
off of all but one drug. She had to have a thyroid medicine um, to thrive. But that's been my experience is um, because of the work we do, I can tell the difference between her and all the rest of those kids who don't have to do this work. But because we have to do it, we get results that we wouldn't have known if we didn't do it.
I love that. We had a chance to do a little bit of a chat before this episode, and you brought up a word that I wanted to make sure I ask you about on the show. And that's the idea of, instead of consequences, the idea of prosequences. So tell me a little bit about that concept and how that plays a role in your life and her life.
That's not my term. I heard that term in another support group, but I've said it enough times. It's my term. It's my
You've
term
adopted
now.
it.
Yeah, Greg B told it to me, but the prosequences is the good things that happen. You may have something bad happen, and you got to right that ship. But then good things happen. Once you learn your lesson, you get to see what good things happen and what good things change. Um, one of the prosequences of being Down syndrome, just in general, is it teaches me humility, it teaches me acceptance, and it teaches me I can only control what I can control. However, setting that stage, I don't have to be mad at her for stuff. I get to see what happens when I don't try to control stuff so much. Because we've had to change her diet, it is so obvious when she's around other kids who eat a lot of sugar and who don't have as good of a diet. But her brain can focus. You know, she learns. Now, she may get the math problems wrong, but she's smart as a whip. She's got better sense of direction than I do. And I'm 49 years old, grew up in Louisville. My 8-year-old knows better on the roads than I do. And I just don't think that these would have happened if I wasn't constantly pushing her, if I wasn't restricting the things that are amping her immune system up and making it hard to heal. If I didn't do this work, I would never get to see the results of doing this work. But you got to do the work to get the results. If I'm not pushing that child, she's just on cruise control and she needs to be pushed right now. You've got until kids are 9 years old. And what they do growing up to 9, they will in turn do the rest of their life. That's why people like McDonald's have a playground, because they're not after the parents, really. They're after the kids. Because if you go for the Happy Meal in your youth, you're going to eat McDonald's the rest of your life. And so the work that I'm doing now, and pushing her and pushing her and pushing her, she likes to be pushed. She likes to do work. She likes to do these things. She generally does and does it on her own. But if I wasn't making it fun during the summer to do the math, if we weren't making games out of it, if I wasn't sitting there with her and said, hey, we're going to do some more, the work could be horrible. It's not about that. It's about the drive and keeping that brain active. And so it takes more work, but I get to see the results of it. And that's the prosequences that happen, are the good things that you might not anticipate. Humans are so inclined to focus on the thing that's wrong with every situation that sometimes we miss out on the good stuff that happened. We just want to kind of gloss it over. But we need to cherish that and kind of make them feel good about themselves for doing that stuff. It's not about just doing the math homework. She'll do it and she'll give me an F. She did the work, but she likes to come show me that I got an F. It's not about the F. It's about the process of doing the work and then the thing that happens at the end of it. And that's a consequence of doing this work during the summer is I get F's all the time while mommy gets A's. The consequence of an F.
I love that perspective. I think it's a really important thing for listeners. A uniqueness you bring is this idea that we get so focused on the obstacles, the challenges, the things that are going to be maybe harder about this path. And it's not to pretend there aren't obstacles, but keeping your eye on all the things that you never would have experienced had this not been the path that's before you. I think that's powerful.
Yeah. If I take it one step further, I know the obstacles are going to happen. Okay. There's a repeated cycle of obstacles happening and then relief. And then life shows up and relief. When life shows up, I expect it now. I don't get all emotional when it happens because I know there's going to be relief after it. So I come to expect it. And when it happens, here it is. I don't want to get all emotional about it. Just take it for life as it is. It can't be good every day. There are more bad things coming down the pipeline. I expect it. So when it happens, I try not to get too emotional about it because I can't be logical when I'm emotional. So expect the things to happen. And when they do, you're like, well, there it is. I knew it was coming anyways. It's been a month. Something's bound to happen soon.
Yeah. And when you think about it, we all do pretty well when things are going fine. When we're really challenged is when we face obstacles, right? And that's true for any of us. It's true for any kid as they're growing up. I think sometimes when you have kids who are facing extra challenges, the tendency is to want to try to remove obstacles instead of teaching kids that obstacles are going to be part of your journey. Learning how to sort of figuratively fall down, get back up in life is probably the most important thing, not learning how to function when everything's going smooth.
Yeah, and those are your consequences. So use it as a learning thing. Once the emotions die down, what did I learn from this? Is that bringing us closer together? Can I keep it from happening in the future? Probably not. It's probably going to happen again. But those are the good things. You don't just focus on the bad. You'll be having bad things all the time. But even in the midst of bad, focus on the good that can come out of it. And them kids feel those emotions too.
Yeah.
So we're teaching them also how to deal with negative things in a positive way.
I'm going to ask you a fun dad bragging kind of question. For folks who've never met Willow, just tell us a little bit about what she's into, what she likes, what you're most proud of her for.
And she was out with the grandparents and getting some breakfast. And this lady came over to her and wanted to put her on the cover of a book.
Hmm.
And she said, I was going to put a willow tree on the book, but I saw your girl in there, like her name's Willow. And she's like, oh my gosh. And Willow just made that lady's life right then. Now, I don't really want her on the cover of a book because I don't want her on a billboard either. If I don't want that to get out of control, so I would just as soon not stop it, stop it right now.
Sure.
But then kiddos, and that different way of looking at reality makes people's lives all the time. And they can be in a supermarket at Aldi, it happens all the time, and they're in there and they're mad. And I don't even know what they're mad about, but they take a look at their kiddos and melt. And it just totally just changes their day. People look at me and they look at Willow and they stare at Willow, and then I'm out of the picture at that point. you know and so just the ability of watching her interact with other people. I'm Willow's dad. Everybody knows Willow. I don't even know how people know Willow, but they do. And she's in this friend's school in Louisville, Kentucky, which has honestly kept her out of public schools. I'm hoping that it allows her to be a kid. Let them kids be kids. And so
Yeah.
we did put her in a school. She has a person there with her all the time while she's at school. She has one-to-one. She still needs one-to-one care.
Sure.
But it's been such a blessing because she's not been tainted by the times that we're in today. And so that was really important for me to try to keep her into an environment that allowed her to just stay a kid and focus on the kid stuff instead of grown-up people stuff and fear and things like that. I'm really blessed that we were able to get her into that school. And I'm blessed that there was programs out there that have allowed us to get funding from the state for things that maybe we couldn't afford or wouldn't be able to do without it. I'm really
Yeah.
thankful for all those state programs that are out there.
It sounds like one of her superpowers is the effect she has on people.
That's one of them. Yeah. It's, you know, I haven't been around the spectrum of all of them. But a lot of them, they soften you in general. And even when I see somebody in a wheelchair with crutches on their legs, that's still a special child, and I see it in them, and I see how I can bring out the best in people. And having never been around it, I was a Prosequence. I wasn't expecting all that.
I love that. Okay, I want to ask you something different, but first we're going to take a quick break. When you have a kid who is different, all your ducks need to be in a row, especially your money. Cam Howell with Primerica knows the joys and challenges as he and his wife raise their medically fragile son, Brooks. Cam brings over 14 years of experience to help his clients be protected, have a plan for the future, reduce debt, and connect to resources. Get your financial house in order so that you can enjoy every moment with your child. Reach out today at 502 803 5075. And now back to the show. Mike, I wanted to ask you because I ask you questions about a dad, but you're also admittedly, when we had our pre-interview, told me you kind of look at the world through a different lens. Being a chiropractor and being kind of in that wellness space, you're a person who kind of likes to look at problems and issues at a different lens. How has that informed your journey as a parent raising a kid like Willow?
I really feel blessed because I have an education in what doesn't work as well. And I know that it takes work, even more work now than it used to stay healthy. And we have to do a lot of work to keep her healthy. But she's, like I said, she's not on drugs, with the exception of the one thyroid. Um, it's kept our whole family healthier. Um, but I know how to fix problems instead of taking drugs. And I know how to
Mm,
restrict the things that are causing the problems. We make food at home. We don't rely on a bunch of processed food because chemicals don't help her brain at all. What's in meat, meat. What's in vegetables, vegetables. What's in bread, what's in Coca-Cola, just chemicals, 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 chemicals. And although it is easier to eat processed food and all that stuff, she won't be very healthy if I do. So the fact that we are able to do it, I can write down on a pad of paper my plan for her. I don't just wing it, and it works. And that's been a real blessing for me. Chiropractors ask, why did this happen? And we treat that. We don't treat the symptoms as much as the underlying problem that led to them. And
mm,
that viewpoint, if you don't want to take drugs, you got to ask, why do you need to take drugs in the first place? And let's go work on fixing that. It's work that you've got to learn on your own because your doctors don't know, and you will be smarter than your doctor. And your doctor is not there to heal anything; they're there to give you drugs. And so your doctor is not going to fix you. Big pharma is not going to fix you. Your government is not going to fix you. It's all on you to fix it. Or you
mm.
can go to them and take drugs if you want to. I don't want to do that. And I get the results of fixing those problems. I'm so blessed to have that education, but I had to read a lot of books and stuff and watch podcasts myself too, because even what I learned in school was pretty much wrong.
Mm. So it's been an education. If we were to bring you in as a speaker to a group of young parents, they've all got kids that are like under 5, and they have a
Mm-hmm.
variety of things, not just Down syndrome, could be kids on the spectrum, could be kids with more cerebral palsy, or just kids who have issues but no diagnosis, because that's common too. And this is going to be way oversimplified, but if you had to give them some overarching advice as parents that are on this quote different journey, what would 4 or 5 key things be to you? What would you tell them?
Um, I would tell them that the body has this amazing ability to heal. And the first step to fixing problems is remove the problem. So everything you put in their mouth, is that going to help them heal, or is it another toxic chemical that the body's got to get rid of? That right there, when you remove problems that aren't causing health, then you're going to be more health. And
Mm,
so it also it's a humbling experience. Uh, Putting somebody else first, but also with the developmentally challenged, there's just a whole bunch of extra layers. And when I thought I was being humbled, I was getting mad about being humbled sometimes. I got to get more grounded and sit back and take a deep breath and realize what really matters. And it gets me to stop thinking about myself so much. Humility, the impact of their diet, and you got to find something really that they like to do, and then you got to do it with them and encourage it, and hopefully it's a healthy thing that's encouraging them to grow. But they need stuff to do. It gives them a purpose. Sitting around and just coasting on life isn't stimulating them to be stronger. And so, find stuff that they like to do and do it with them, but allow yourself to enjoy it. I don't like going to the water parks and the kiddie slides I'm selfish, I want to do something I want to do. But that's what she wants to do, and it's encouraging her, and that gives her life uh a lot of joy doing that stuff. And it gets her around with other kids and stuff as well. And it teaches her climbing, but once I'm out there, I'm checking her muscles on the monkey bars and stuff. Challenge them kids. Don't make it all about yourself. Make it really about them, because it is an investment into their future in their teens and 20s and 30s. This is the education that you're giving them. So they're going to pick up off of you. And if you're challenging them, they're going to like to be challenged. And that's going to pay off when they get out and they're not dependent upon you so much. They've got that set of skills, but they know how to deal with the challenges without getting all frustrated and mad too. That's a couple of tips that I've got for them.
I love that. And I think bringing back what you mentioned earlier is just not being so focused on everything that is hard and looking at those prosequences, right? Looking at the parts of this path that you never would have experienced had you had a quote typical kid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anger and joy start the same way within the body, and it's a little pit in the stomach. And so when I'm angry and I got that little frustration, I try to switch it over to happiness and joy. My brain puts the spin on it. It's all in my head.
Yeah, I love
So when
that.
I feel myself getting frustrated, that's an internal problem that I have. Nobody else even knows about it. It's all in my head. So I better take a deep breath, check myself, and remember what's important and focus back on that child.
I love it. Well, folks, if you have enjoyed listening to this today, we don't want to be a best kept secret. I bet you there's other parents that would love to hear some of Mike's viewpoints and philosophies, and we don't want to be a best kept secret. So go to our Facebook page, the Seeing Ability Podcast, and first of all, follow the podcast, rate and review it wherever you're listening to the podcast, and then send it to a friend, share it with others. We're still looking for future guests. I'm right now doing 2 episodes a month. One is an individual or a family who's traveling this path. And because of my nonprofit background, I like to shine a spotlight on folks doing good work. So my second episode of the month is a nonprofit. It could be a summer camp. It could be a therapy center. Could be some out of the box idea that somebody came up with. A lot of really amazing nonprofits were founded by parents who saw a need and then they got together and did it. But you guys know those nonprofits all over the country. Connect them to me. I'd love them to have them as a guest. And again, get the word out so more people are listening. Again, my goals are education. I think you got some nuggets today. Inspiration. I mean, Mike's passion is contagious. So if that didn't inspire you, I don't know what will. And then community. We want this podcast to be part of your village. Mike, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Jim. It's been great talking with you. I appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.